to a special episode of SomerKnits. I'm not even sure which number it is. I will have to look at that when I'm done filming and I'll pop it in the editing. But if you're new here, welcome. This is not going to be my normal podcast format where I typically talk about finished objects, works in progress, and acquisitions, although I'm trying not to do that this year. A little bit of what Professor Pearl calls dream knitting, things that I want to be working on. Instead, today I'm going to go back and look at projects, garments that I have finished over the last few years and talk about how they've held up to wear, how often I reach for them, how I feel about the fit, etc. So hopefully you enjoy that. I do want to make sure that I talk about the yarns and things and whether or not they pill and stuff. So I am going to be referencing my phone for notes. I keep all my notes in Ravelry so that I can accurately tell you when I made the garment, and then we can talk about how well it stood the test of time. So without further ado, let's dive right in. I have been knitting for over 20 years, but I've only been knitting sweaters for the last 3. So most of these sweaters aren't very old. I did knit a sweater back in the early aughts, but it was a pieced sweater and a very rustic wool, and it's a very tight fit, and I don't currently wear it. I did do some mending on it and try it on last year sometime and post some pictures of it, and it's still lovely, and I hold on to it because it's gorgeous, and I would like to be able to wear it again someday. And if not, I'd like to be able to pass it on to one of my kids. It's a very gender neutral sweater, mostly blue with some pops of other colors in it. But the first sweater that I want to talk about how it's held up is the Weekender sweater by Andrea Mowry. Now, for ease of popping each sweater on and off, I'm just going to be wearing a basic white t-shirt underneath all of them. So the neckline on this shirt doesn't really lend itself to that. It has a beautiful boat neck. And I love that, but I don't tend to wear a t-shirt under it. So just as a heads up on that. I knit the Weekender sweater out of Nature's Luxury, On Stage Sport, and Silk Divine that was gifted to me on Valentine's Day in 2020 by my husband. So I wanted to find a pattern that I would wear a lot to use that yarn, and I wanted to find the perfect thing. He made a beautiful yarn bouquet and put it actually in a planter instead of a vase. And it was gorgeous. So I looked at it that way for a long time while I thought about what I wanted to make. So in the spring of 2020, I did Andrea Mowry's March to May knit along, and I chose the Weekender sweater. And I still love this pattern, and I would totally do it again. It may not have been the best choice for a first dip back into sweater knitting because it is bottom up, but I really enjoyed it. It went pretty quick. You do knit the whole thing inside out because the purl side is the side that is showing at the end, and then this faux seam runs up the center, but then the sleeves are knit in stockinette. So this yarn is amazingly soft and has a lovely drape to it, but it does pill a lot. I have not depilled recently because I wanted everything in its natural state to show you how things have held up. And you can see that it is in desperate need of debobbling. So I will probably be doing that sometime this week. I love this sweater. It is frequently too warm for me to wear indoors, but it is perfect for if we are going to be outside or if I'm going to be in a place where I know it's going to be cold. When I originally knit this sweater, I knit a size 2, and that was within the appropriate ease range given by the designer. So I may pop in my original finished object picture, but I still think the fit is lovely. I love that the back hem is longer than the front. I like that split hem on the side. Overall, I feel like the yarn itself has held up really well because I do love this sweater. It's just that it is a soft yarn and it does pill. And maybe over time, now I say that it is now 2023 and I knit this sweater in the spring of 2020. I may have only worn it once or twice the year that I finished it, maybe a little more than that. Let's see what month I finished it in because Oklahoma gets pretty warm pretty quickly. So I finished it April 15th of 2020. So I probably only wore it once or twice that year. And then I have worn it in 21, 22, and now going into 23. So I'd say overall, I still love the style. I still love the yarn. It does pill. The next sweater that I want to talk about is the Casa Grande by Sharon Hartley. Now, I test knit this sweater over the summer of 2020, and I don't wear it nearly as often as I should. I enjoyed this test knit so much. The sleeves are done first or separately. I think I may have started with them. But I did a fade, and there are two reasons I don't wear this sweater as often as I should. One of them is that my husband's family ruined it for me by calling it an LSU sweater, which it is not. My goal was the colors of an iris. I love the purple and yellow of a beautiful blooming purple iris, which is what I was going for. And then the whole comparison just kind of killed my vibe. So be careful when trying to interpret what somebody has done with their knitting because it's probably better to ask and see what they were going for rather than totally killing somebody's vibe. But let's talk about the yarn. The yarn is fingering weight yarn, hand dyed by the Violet Valentine. And so it was her pineapple colorway and her iris colorway, and then a custom dyed purple to go with the iris colorway because I told her what I wanted to do, and she did that for me. So, I said there were two reasons that I don't wear this sweater as often as I should. There's actually three. So one of them is that I went a little too deep on the folded collar, and instead of it only being an inch, I think it ended, or maybe it was supposed to be an inch and a half, and it ended up like an inch and 3/4, and it wouldn't seem like that would matter, but ultimately it did matter because it just feels wide and a little awkward. So the folded collar is there specifically for the bow, which is ribbon, and then the keyhole in the back. So obviously this sweater isn't typically worn with a t-shirt either. It's a dressier sweater. It's lightweight, and I do enjoy when I wear it to the office, but I often forget it's there because it folds up so thin that in my stack of sweaters, it sometimes disappears. So I just need to remember to put it on top and remind myself that it's there because it looks amazing with a pencil skirt. It's a really nice dressy sweater. You can see the lace sleeves. I have had no pilling from this fingering weight yarn. It is a sock yarn. Let me check the blend real quick. Hopefully all this moving around isn't disturbing, but I just want to be able to show you all the bits and pieces of the sweater. So I knit the size that has a 40-inch bust, and I don't remember what the recommended ease was for the pattern, but at that time I was within the recommended ease. I now have a 40-inch bust, so at the bust line I have 0 ease. And maybe I will pop in a picture of my original finished object photo as well. But the Violet Valentine favorite sock, it's going to take forever to load now that I want it to, is an 80-20 blend. And you can see the twist in it pretty easily in person. It has held up really well. And like I said, I do wear this to the office with a pencil skirt and stuff. It's just when I'm reaching into the stack for a sweater, I don't always notice it. But it's beautiful for transitional seasons, and especially in the spring around here, I feel like the colors are great around Easter. And overall, I love this sweater, so I would highly recommend the pattern. It's the Casa Grande sweater. It is a fingering weight sweater, so that is a bit of a commitment, but I feel like there's a whole lot of just stockinette in the round in here, so it's pretty easy to just mindlessly knit most of the body of this sweater. It is knit bottom up. I think that if I'd had a better idea of weighing my yarns and everything, I'd have started blending earlier, and the bottom yellow portion would be smaller, and the blending would have started sooner. But and then I'd have more purple at the top. But I wasn't as sure of myself on weighing what I had left and using it. I did manage to make the sleeves match, which is excellent. But overall, it's a great sweater. It has held up really well, and I would totally recommend this pattern. We are really on a roll with sweaters that I do not usually wear a t-shirt with. I may have already mentioned it, but I'm sticking with long sleeves this time. So I will do another video sometime where I go through all of the short sleeve t-shirts and sweaters that I have knit. And maybe I'll even do a third video on how my children's knits have held up. But for the time being, this fluffy cabled piece is a pattern that I had to hunt down a magazine for. So it's just called the 01 Cabled Pullover by Catherine Mells. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. It is supposed to be knit with 2 strands of mohair, but I actually knit it with 1 strand of Knit Picks Aloft and 1 strand of Knit Picks Shimmer Lace. I don't remember a whole lot about this pattern because I knit it December of 2020 and January of 2021. So I knit the whole thing in less than a month. It is pieced and seamed, and I do think that's necessary. I did think about converting this pattern into the round, but I do think the seams are necessary to give the floaty fabric structure. Typically, I wear this with a collared shirt that comes out over this wide boat neck. I used to wear it, maybe, like I said, maybe I will pop in some finished objects photos. Someday, maybe I will learn to record my screen in Ravelry. But I did, glare. I did used to wear it with just a tank top under it in a pink to kind of match. I don't normally wear it where you can see like the waist of my pants. I just wore this to work on Monday, actually. So I do reach for it. I do feel like it has to be steamed every time I take it out to wear it because the fabric creases very easily. However, there hasn't been really any pilling. You can see there's the nice halo from the mohair, but there's no pilling. The main issue is that I feel like I have to steam this, and I have a steamer in my bathroom, so it's not a big deal. But I do feel like I have to steam it every time I put it on. Also, I added some elastic to the neckline to draw it in a little bit. And I don't know if you can see it very well. It's kind of puckering because of that, but the neckline grew almost all the way out to my shoulders. This sweater has grown a little bit over time, even like post blocking. So that's just a heads up. If you happen to make one, I would just be aware that if you use what I used, the fabric has grown a bit over time. So it makes it very difficult with bra straps and tank top straps. So I did put some elastic in to draw it in, and I'll pop in the picture I took when I wore it to work on Monday because it does look good with a nice collared shirt popped out over it. But I'm just not sure that I love it on its own right now. Also, I thought about doing something to draw the cuffs in. I did follow the pattern as far as going down needle sizes for things, but I feel like I should have gone down further needle sizes. And instead of worrying about my bind off being loose enough, I think I should have gone for a very structured bind off for both the neck and the sleeves because both have grown and feel just a little bit too big and like they no longer represent the finished look the pattern is supposed to have. I also no longer have the ease at the bust that I originally did. It was a much looser, floatier shirt at the bust line for me originally, but I still think the fit is pretty good. And overall, I love it for work because my office can never keep a constant temperature. So there are days where it goes from hot to cold within the same day, and it's a nice in between. It's warm because of the mohair, but it's cool because it's obviously so lightweight and air can go through it. So, um, overall, would I knit this pattern again? I still absolutely love the look of the finished object photos. I may try it again to get a little closer to the design intent for this pattern. Um, but I don't know. There's so many other things to knit. I'm not much of a re-knitter, so maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. They are big, easy cables. I don't know how well they'll show up on screen. Maybe you can see them right there. Super easy cables that run down both the front and the back. And it's on really big needles. So it was a very quick, very easy knit. Like I said, less than a month. And because I was knitting on it in December, I am absolutely positive that I was also doing gift knits at the same time. There is no way I was knitting on this monogamously. But overall, Knit Picks Aloft and Knit Picks Shimmer Lace held together has held up well over time, but did stretch out a bit. Next up, we're going to call this long sleeve because we called the last one long sleeve, is the first love note that I ever knit. And I call it my Candy Hearts love note because the fingering weight yarn underneath is a hand-dyed yarn from Clark and L that was supposed to look like Valentine's candy hearts. And it was one of those subscriptions where you can see the photo ahead of time, but then the yarn itself is a mystery. So I had ordered 2 skeins because the photo was very pink and blue heavy. And when I got it, it had a whole lot of lime green in it, like way more than I had planned on. So I actually paired it with this aqua Knit Picks Aloft again. And that softened that really bright lime green and brought it to just a nice pastel aqua green, so a little more blue leaning green tone, and I love it now. But like I said, this was my very first love note. I have now knit 4 love notes, so clearly I enjoy the pattern. Sorry, there's a little bit of writing on my shirt, so you can see that through the lace patterning. But once again, I don't always wear a t-shirt with this sweater. I typically wear just a camisole underneath, in either white or pale pink, depending on what I want to pop through the lace. And I like that this shirt has the high-low hemline. I definitely opted for that. I do keep tugging on it because I probably would have gone for a little more length in the body, but I was worried about running out of yarn because I only had the 2 skeins of the hand-dyed, and I only had 3 skeins of the Knit Picks Aloft at the time. I made this in January of 2021 on a road trip with my husband. We left and went skiing for a couple days without our kids. It was a lovely gift. I think I'm destroying my hair putting sweaters on and off, but we're going to live with that. This has held up really well. I tend to wear this one, once again, to my office because it feels dressier to me. I have a pair of light pink slacks that I think it looks wonderful with. But let's talk about how it's held up. This is another one that can get fairly creased from being put away and stacked up, but it's not too bad today. It is now at the point where I have very little to no positive ease at the bust, which was not the case when I knit it, but that doesn't bother me. I think it still has a good look, even with no positive ease. I mean, if there's any, there's like a centimeter maybe, but not a lot. But I think it still looks really good that way. I think that the sizing in this sweater is versatile enough that you can go for more fitted or you can go for looser. And when I do my short sleeve video, I will show my looser version that I did short sleeve for springtime in a really pretty pale pink. But overall, once again, not much pilling. Oh, I have picked up just probably from the dog a little bit of schmutz. No real pilling, no real issues to this yarn. There's just a tiny bit under the arms, and you can see that was just like that one bobble. Other than that, there hasn't been any on the body. I love the halo. I think that Knit Picks Aloft is a really soft, affordable mohair yarn. I say affordable compared to some others. I feel like it falls on the more affordable end of the spectrum for a silk mohair that doesn't have any wool in it, that is just silk and mohair. But overall, this sweater has held up really well. I do wear it fairly frequently during the transitional seasons. And even in the winter time, I just wear a coat going into work. But I still love this sweater. I would totally knit it again. I'm very happy with the yarn. Once again, it was an 80/20 sock yarn that I held with Knit Picks Aloft. Very little pilling except right at the underarms. So I would say 2021 to 2023, it's been a solid 2 years on this sweater, and I would say it still looks really good. It probably gets washed once a season, usually right before putting everything away for the hot part of the summer. So that is my first love note. Next up is my striped sweater by Andrea Mowry. And this may have been the first sweater finished object that I ever showed on my podcast. I made this, let me start over. I made the striped sweater totally from stash. I had a number of different yarns that I just thought the colors vibed well together, and I really enjoyed mixing them up. The stripes are not in any particular order. Some were not full skeins and some were, and I just really enjoyed doing that. So the yarn first, let's talk about this gray purple gray. It was a Fiber for the People DK weight yarn that was a Lucky Strike. This yarn was a DK hand dyed by the Violet Valentine, and it was that was a sock yarn that I held double. Sorry, I'm trying to remember what each one was. This Suri alpaca was a Lucky Strike by Fiber for the People. This gray is I think a Rowan Kid Silk Haze. It's a Kid Silk mohair held double. In retrospect, I think I would have held it triple. Although if I was to take out any of the yarns I had used in this, I would actually take that one out. I used that gray specifically because I thought I was going to run out of all these pinks. And I actually didn't. I ended up with plenty left over. So Andrea Mowry has said before in her podcast that she pads her yardage required for her sweaters by about 10% because she'd hate for anyone to run out. And I get that. But I totally thought I would run out or thought I would need more. So I added that gray, and I really didn't have to. That also does leave you a pretty good amount for swatching. So just as a heads up, don't be afraid of running out of yarn on her patterns for the most part if you're following the pattern and if you've got engaged. So the one that you only see a couple of stripes of, that's the darker, that was a leftover from doing a dress for my daughter. And whenever I get to a video of how my kids' stuff has held up, I'll totally show that dress top because it's beautiful. And then there was another Suri that was a Lucky Strike. So the Suri are held double in each of their stripes. The sock yarn is held double. The mohair is held double. The only yarn that is not held double is that purple gray color that is used for the collar, cuffs. You can see there's a couple of stripes of it, and then the hem. So the collar, she offers two different collars in this sweater pattern, and I did the looser, wider collar, and it has stretched out over time. And I do think I'm going to thread like that really skinny sewing elastic through the collar and draw it in a little bit. Not so much that it puckers, but enough that it hides a bra strap. Because right now, wearing this with a camisole under it and just a regular bra both show unless I'm constantly tugging up on the sides of the collar, which is not what you want to be doing all day, every day. You don't want to constantly feel like you're having to tug your sweater into place. And I have another sweater that we'll get to where that is definitely the case all the time. I do love that the neckline isn't choking me, but I do want to draw it back into where it was originally before it stretched out with wear. This is definitely one of my most worn sweaters. I find it really easy to just grab and throw on. I absolutely love the feel. All the yarns are so soft. The ease is now, I don't know, a couple inches maybe. It had more ease originally when I knit it, but I still think it looks good. I think it hits at a good place. Obviously, you can personalize the length on your striped sweater. I did like bracelet length cuffs, which is my preference because when I'm typing at work or using the calculator or even at home trying to get things done, I love not having my sleeves fall down over my hands. Would 1000% knit this sweater again, and I have, which we'll see in the short sleeve video. But all these super soft yarns have definitely been pilling. The suri especially. And I don't think that I really knew that about suri going in, about it pilling. But definitely there are pills all over this sweater, and I need to spend some time debobbling it. So the yarns have held up well. I think the sweater itself has held up well. I think the look is still classic, but there has been a lot of pilling. Like I said, I just found a bunch of yarns in my stash that I thought looked good together. So if you're looking for a stash busting garment and you have a bunch of DK or fingering that you could hold double that you think would look good, go for the striped sweater. It's really nice round yoke construction. I would either go down another needle size to do this collar again or go for the more structured collar. My second version of this, which is short sleeve, the collar has not stretched out as much, but the sweater is less than a year old. So I don't know if it's going to be time or fiber content. This was, like I said, this was a superwash DK, so superwash does have a tendency to stretch out. The other striped sweater that I knit was in a merino hemp. So we'll see if that holds up a little better over time as far as the collar staying structured. But I think a little bit of sewing elastic can totally bring this in. It could also be that, you know, that my arms being a bit wider and my shoulders being a bit wider are drawing the collar out a bit more. Maybe there's a bit more tugging on it because see, when I pull the sleeves more up into up farther on my biceps and stuff, it doesn't pull quite as badly on the collar. But once again, I don't want to be constantly tugging on it. I want the sleeves to fall where they fall naturally. So a little bit of elastic, and I think that we'll be golden again. Next up, we have the Easy Eyelet Yolk Cardigan by Knit-O-Matic. Goodness, I am making my hair crazy with the on and off of the sweaters. That's okay. I believe that I showed this as a work in progress on my first podcast episode because it was kind of a long-term knit because I kept getting bored with the back and forth because it is knit flat, so there is a lot of purling. I feel like the yoke went really quickly, and then I just kind of slogged through the body. So I got distracted by a number of things. I spent that summer knitting a bunch of short sleeve tops and things for other people, socks for my family, a sweater for my daughter, like all kinds of things. My second love note was knit in there. That was for my daughter. But let's talk about the Easy Eyelet Yoke Cardigan. I had an entire bag of Nashua hand knit cilantro in my stash since like 2005 or 2006. I bought it at Eva's Needlework in Thousand Oaks, California when I lived there, and I still had the entire bag. I'm sure she had it on sale, and I absolutely loved the color, and that's why I bought it. But it was, or is, an Aran Weight cotton acrylic blend. So the color is Delft Blue. It is still smooth and beautiful. The cotton acrylic has held up amazing. Like, absolutely no wear showing on this cardigan. I still love the fit. It is a very stretchy, bouncy yarn, so I do find myself fussing with it when I first put it on to get it to lay right. But because it's a cotton acrylic blend, it is a great transitional season piece for me because it breathes well. I love all of Knit-A-Tude's Easy Eyelet Yolk patterns, and I have bought them all. I think I'd love to make the dress sometime, whether it's for me or for my daughter. I think it's really pretty. And I would love to actually make this cardigan again. Even though I said it was a slog, I would make it again in a more drapey yarn. So the cotton is kind of heavy, as cotton tends to be when you get a whole garment knit out of it. So while it's breathable, it does have some substantial weight to it. But I would love to do this again in like a very floaty, drapey yarn, something really soft. There are so many projects of the Easy Eyelet Yoke cardigan that you can get inspiration from. But I do not think they make the Nashua hand knit cilantro anymore. I'm not even sure if that company is still around. So just a heads up on that. But I do think that this is a classic, timeless look for the cardigan. You know, I don't think you can go wrong with this shape, this style. And like I said, it's held up really well. It's just, I think it's a very flattering round yoke fit. Some round yokes are amazing, and others, as you'll see, the fit is kind of, ooh. And whether that's my gauge or the pattern itself, who knows. But overall, highly recommend the Easy Eyelet Yoke cardigan. If you do happen to stumble across the Nashua hand knit cilantro in an estate sale or a charity shop or something, it is a pretty fun yarn, but it is a cotton acrylic blend, so it just depends on if you think that that is something that you would enjoy wearing or not. I do think it would actually make really nice washcloths. I know there's a little bit of acrylic in there, and that's fine. Helps the cotton hold its shape and be a little more bouncy. But I could see doing like pretty hand towels or washcloths in this, or a baby knit of some sort, because it does wash very easily. So easy to wash and wear, and I would go ahead and pick it up if you encounter some and you love the color. I would give this yarn 2 thumbs up. Next up, in October of 2021, I busted out this Felix Pullover in about 2 weeks. The Felix Pullover can be a really quick knit. I made a size 2, but I didn't get gauge, and I knew that going in. My gauge was bigger, so the size 2 I absolutely expected to have more ease than intended. If I did it again, and if I did it at the same gauge, I would go down 1 more needle size to bring the collar in a little bit more. But I normally wear this with a dark t-shirt under it, and it does not bother me. The intention behind this sweater was absolutely to pick a word from Laura of Penrose Knits, maximum cozy. So, oh goodness, the light is flickering, and I don't know if you can see that, but it almost looks like, because of it, the recording is starting to get grainy. So if that is the case, I absolutely apologize. Let me see if I can adjust something. Okay, I don't know if I was able to make that any better, but so the Felix Pullover, knit for maximum cozy. I bought this marled silver and brown 100% alpaca at the farmer's market back in like 2008, 2009, while my husband and I were still dating, and we were still doing things like getting up early on a Saturday morning and going to the farmer's market because we didn't have kids and all those things that sometimes take up all of your time. But I bought this yarn, and it was 2 skeins of about 200 yards each. Or maybe it was 220 yards each. I forget. I knew it wasn't enough for a whole sweater. And originally I'd intended to make a shawl, but I knit a 100% alpaca shawl in a brown black marl, and I just wasn't vibing on that when I was stash diving, trying to decide what I want to make. So my goal was to find a way to make this alpaca into a garment. And I did that by purchasing some more 100% alpaca in this deep chocolate brown at Fiber Christmas one July. So at Fiber Christmas, I took the yarn with me, found a good color match for the brown, and purchased the solid brown. And then I also purchased this emerald green fingering weight sock yarn that you see running through the whole sweater. Now, I'm going to tip you up just a sec. Hopefully that doesn't blow it out again. We'll see. So the vibe I get from this sweater overall is like skiing through a snowy forest. So like the silver kind of says snow, and then the green is like the pines, and the brown obviously the wood. And I just that's just the vibe I get from it. It wasn't what I was going for, but when I finished the sweater and I put it on, I was just like, this is the vibe I'm getting from this combo. And I absolutely love it. This is my super warm, pull it on to go hiking, pull it on to sit outside at my kiddo's baseball game. Like, to me, it's an outdoor sweater. I don't view it as a dressy sweater, although I have worn it to work before. I know that you can't see the eyelets as well as you could if it was a solid color, but that doesn't bother me. I would knit this pattern again. In fact, I was thinking about knitting the cardigan version, but I haven't gotten to it. It does still have a very good amount of ease. I think for the amount of yarn I had, I got great length out of it. I just extended the ribbing on the body until I knew I was about out of the brown, and then did a sewn bind off on the bottom. There's nothing I don't like about this sweater. Does it pill? Yes. You can see, maybe, yes, under the arm, how much pilling there is there. And so I do need to go through and debobble this sweater. I was trying to leave all the sweaters in their natural state before I filmed this so that you could really see what the yarn had done over time. The hand-dyed sock yarn that I have running through the whole sweater is by 316 Dye Studio, and it is gorgeous. Their yarn is so vibrant and deep and just is really beautiful. So if you're not familiar with 316 Dye Studio, you should look them up on Instagram. I was really tempted to buy more of their yarn this past year at Fiber Christmas, but I wanted to try vendors that I had not shopped with before. So I mainly went to vendors that were new or whose yarn I had seen before but not purchased this time. But this is the Felix Pullover by Amy Christoffers. Hopefully I said that right. And it's the size 2, but at a very loose gauge in an alpaca DK and 316 Dye Studio sock. And once again, I made this in October of 2021, so it has seen quite a bit of wear. So I don't feel like the pilling on it is bad at all for the amount of wear it's had. This sweater also doesn't crease from being folded up in the pile of sweaters like some of my others do. I never notice creases in it. I grab it, I throw it on, and it's always perfect. So there's a gremlin in my computer. I went to open iMovie to talk about this sweater, and I may have clicked the icon next to iMovie, I'm not even sure, but it opened up the Ravelry project page for this sweater, which I've not been on my computer at all today. So I don't know why there's a gremlin in my computer, but there is. So that's just a little creepy. But this is my Christmas Rununculus. I made it in December of 2021, and obviously it hasn't gotten as much wear as other sweaters I own because it's a Christmas sweater. So I only wear it in November and December. And last December of 21, I kept waiting for it to get cold, and it never did. In fact, we had such a hot Christmas that we wore like t-shirts and had Christmas Eve outside. So it just never got cold. It only got 1 or 2 wears last December. So this December, I made a point of wearing it as much as I could. And as you can see, if you look at the underarm, there has been no real pilling or bobbling. It has just held up really well. There is a little bit of a halo now after wearing it for quite a while. But I think that's just part of the yarn. It may pill over time, but overall, I love it. This yarn is an 80/20 merino silk blend in a DK weight, and it was hand dyed by Southern Skeins. And I had messaged her to ask if I could purchase a third skein because I had gotten 2, had this idea, but wanted a longer sweater because wintertime, and I like to wear leggings or skinny jeans, even though they may not be in anymore. So I just wanted a longer sweater. So I went for the nice deep ribbing, but obviously a longer body. I did do the pointed sleeves. So they do come up higher on the inside and lower on the outside. And I love them. I think that they're perfect. I would totally knit this again in the same kind of yarn. I would love to work more with merino silk blends. I have a few other garments that I've made in merino silk. But I did alternate skeins because this is a hand-dyed yarn. Pooling still happens, but overall, it's really fun to have a more subtle Christmas sweater rather than like something that's super in-your-face Christmas, where it's just kind of the colors in specks playing out over the garment. So would I knit the Rununculus again? Absolutely, because I've already done that twice. Would I knit with the merino silk again? Yes, because I feel like it's held up very well. I feel like the drape is very flattering. It's just in person, it's got a really lovely sheen to the yarn, and I just feel like it drapes very nicely. So would totally use again. Absolutely would recommend. If I was doing an everything I knit in 2022 video, which I'm not planning to because it's kind of late in January now and it's just, the boat has sailed on that. If I was, though, it would start with this sweater because I got sick in early January of 2022, which seems to be a theme because I got sick in early January of 2023 as well. But I busted out this sweater in 9 days, I think, 9 or 10 days, while I was sick because I couldn't go to the gym and I mostly laid in bed. And that allowed me quite a bit of knitting time. But I had ordered in the fall, after the encouragement of the Creabea and Knitting Traditions and other podcasters, I had ordered during the Black Friday sale from Woolly Knit. And I had gotten 2 British wool cones, 1 merino cone, and 1 of the giant DK hanks that's like 500 grams, I forget, big, like a big hank of DK, right? Like, you know, the bigger than your head size. So this is entirely from 1 hank of the DK from Woolly Knit. So it's 100% wool, non-superwash, very rustic. It is fine next to skin on me unless I get really hot. And I notice when I get hot, I feel the prickle factor more from different yarns. So this is the, oh gosh, I just lost the name of it. The pattern is by Midori Hirose, and it is the Tulip Gentry. And I knew that until I wanted to say it. These tulip cables were super fun to knit. I really enjoyed them. This was the first garment that I knit where you constructed each shoulder separately and then joined the piece to begin working back and forth for the back neck. And then on the front, you did each shoulder piece separately and then joined to work back and forth on the front until eventually joining in the round. So it was the first time I'd done that sweater construction, and I did enjoy it, although I find weaving in ends very tedious, and that does make for more ends. But overall, it was appropriate for the fit of this sweater. I love the boxy fit, but it does come in the there's not waist shaping, but the ribbing draws it in a bit at the bottom. It does have a lot of positive ease, and that was intentional. This is supposed to be like a super cozy throw-on sweater, absolutely no squeezing anywhere. So nice big long sleeves. As you can see, these are the fall over your hand length for extra warmth. I just really enjoyed the process of this knit. I can't recommend it enough. There are so many different versions of this, and I would love to do a lace weight version, because on the project page or the pattern page, she shows different weights of yarn where you've achieved the same gauge by changing your needle size with different yarn weights. And I just love the effect. So I think it'd be lovely to do one in either like a really beautiful like merino silk fingering that would have lovely drape to it, or a lace weight yarn that would just fall like a halo over your body. And I would go short sleeve on either one of those. But this is a DK weight yarn. She does have a sample in a DK that just looks amazing on her. Like I said, it is a non-superwash wool. It has held up pretty well. There are pills. I don't know how well you can see them. It has amazing stitch definition, but if you start looking closely, you can see that I need to go through and pull off just tiny little pills. They haven't gotten big or bad. Under the arm, yeah, there's where you can really see them. Under the arm, you can see the pilling, but it's not awful, and I believe it'll stop over time. Like, I think it will slow down or cease, but it's not all over. It's really mostly in the high wear areas, and I still feel like you get amazing stitch definition with this yarn. And like I said, this is the woolly knit DK that was in the giant hank. And so it was lovely to not have to change balls of yarn at all throughout the whole sweater. But it's definitely warm and cozy, and I had plenty left over. So I would totally do that again. I would knit another cozy sweater. I could see knitting like a ski sweater from this yarn because it is rustic and warm and woolly. So anyway, 100% wool, DK weight from Woolly Knit. Pattern is the Tulip Gentry by Midori Hirose. And I don't remember what size I knit. I knit the medium in order to have, like I said, I wanted plenty of positive ease. I may be over gauge on this one. I don't even remember. I used size 9 needles for the body and size 7 for the ribbing. I have that in my notes. So anyway, it was a really quick knit. Highly recommend. Absolutely love the pattern. Can't recommend the yarn enough, especially for its affordability, because woolly knit is definitely an affordable yarn, and you can get a garment out of it for a lot less than other yarns. The next sweater I definitely spent a little bit longer on, but not much. I cast on January, I just looked at this, 16th, and cast off on February 2nd. So another really quick knit. This was the No Frill Sweater by Petite Knit. I would not knit this sweater again. It's not that I regret knitting it. It's fine. The fit is fine. I have the ease I want. I did knit a size 2, but probably got over gauge because I am a loose knitter. I use size 6 needles on the body and 2 on the ribbing. I don't like the neckline. I know the t-shirt skews it a little bit, but the neckline sits very square, so it comes farther off my neck on the sides, but then is up in my neck on the front, and I don't love it. So I would prefer that the neckline either be slightly rounder or slightly looser, but I don't want it all the way up on my throat and then coming open at the sides. Either it needs to hide a t-shirt or like loosen up a bit. The other thing is that there are so many other options for a basic raglan. So I probably wouldn't reknit this again because I'm not a huge reknitter, and obviously I've reknit the Ranunculus and the Love Note. But as far as on a basic sweater, I don't think I would reknit this one because it's just not special enough for me to want to do it again. The body was a bit of a slog because there's nothing interesting happening, and that's okay. The yarn, though, because that's what we're here for, how did it hold up over time? I do wear this sweater a lot when it's cold because it is very, very warm. This was once again on the woolly knit train, and I used a single strand of woolly knit British wool from their British wool cones. So it's like a light fingering. And then a strand of suri alpaca that was hand dyed by Pancake and Lulu. I had 3 skeins of the suri alpaca in my stash that I had received the Christmas before I actually knit this. So Christmas of 20, I would have received that yarn. So I was really keen to use it because I wanted the finished product. And I love the soft look I got between the cream British wool. The color isn't showing up very well here, but it's almost like a very light heathering of purple and a halo of that super pale purple over that creamy background. So I absolutely adore the color. I would absolutely knit with this yarn combination again. I think I'd pick a different pattern just for interest's sake. But there's nothing wrong with it. The sleeves are an excellent length, and the body is a good length, hits in a really good place. As far as pilling, there really hasn't been too much. The pills that are there are super tiny, even though I wear it a lot. So you can see that that has held up pretty well. This one is another one that does get wrinkled in the pile, and occasionally I hit it with a steamer real quick before I put it on. I've had this one on most of today, though, because I threw it on this morning before I went grocery shopping and things, dropped the kids off at school, hit the grocery store, so it's had time to hang out, but you can see there's still a few wrinkles in the body. I didn't bother to steam this. When I put it on this morning, I originally just threw it on with jeans to be warm because we got hit with some winter weather last night. Not bad. It's not like we're covered in snow or ice, but just wet and damp and cold. So I just wanted something warm and cozy. I don't even need a coat with this sweater most of the time. So I am careful about when I wear it if I know I'm going to be indoors someplace where I can't control the temperature myself. So I am just very conscious of overheating in it because between the non-superwash British wool and the suri alpaca, it has a ton of warmth to it. But I would absolutely knit with this yarn combination again. I feel like it's held up very well. The structure of the sweater has held up very well. The neckline has not really stretched out. So A+ for this particular yarn pairing. Last winter, I was absolutely flying through the sweaters. So another less than 4-week sweater, maybe right at 4 weeks, I made the rainy day pullover. And let's see. I apologize. The designer's name is Yunji Jang. I may be completely pronouncing that incorrectly, and I'm so sorry if I am. But it is the rainy day sweater, and I was super disappointed to learn that it was not size inclusive, something I did not realize when I purchased the pattern. I purchased it when it first came out, so I'd had the pattern in my stash for a while before I got around to knitting it. I do not usually wear this sweater with a t-shirt. I usually wear a dark blue camisole under it, but This is another round yoke textured sweater, kind of like the Ranunculus. So up close, you might be able to see there are some tiny cables and there are eyelets. And the idea behind the stitch pattern is that it does look like raindrops. Um, and then there is more at the bottom. There is more of the raindrop motif. Um, it has slight balloon sleeves, which I love. And this is probably my absolutely most worn sweater, which is why it's disappointing that the pattern, at least at the time I knit it, I have not checked to see if she's extended her size range, is not size inclusive, because this is my most worn sweater. Maybe because of the design, because I do love the fit of the sleeves and I do love how the neckline lays, but more so because of the yarn pairing. So this yarn was entirely custom dyed Pancake and Lulu. This color is, I believe, still on her menu of colors if you check out pancakeandlulu.com. It was Periwinkle in Time, and the base yarn, or the fingering weight yarn that I used, was a Merino silk single, and then I held that with her suri alpaca. So it has made for the most drapey, most luxurious feeling sweater that I have made to date. Absolutely, bar none, this is the most luxurious feeling sweater I have made. It is just so soft. I don't overheat in it like I do in some of my more rustic yarns. It hangs beautifully all the time. I feel like it doesn't wrinkle as much as some of my others. I don't have to hit it with a steamer every time I pull it out of the stack. I feel like it always looks good, whether I'm putting it with jeans or a pencil skirt or leggings, like whatever. It just looks so lovely. I had, I believe, an entire skein of the suri left over and most of a skein of the fingering weight. So I had a ton left over, even doing the sleeves and the body, as long as I wanted them to be. Like, you can see, I think that this is a good fit for me. I love this sweater. I love the colors. I can't recommend this dyer enough. So that lavender suri that I held with the woolly knit was also Pancake and Lulu. And then this is hers, and her colors are just stunning. Absolutely recommend going and looking at her colors if you are looking for more, not variegated yarns, but if you're looking for more solids, tonals, that kind of thing. Check out Pancake and Lulu because her colors are phenomenal. She has a great selection of bases. This has just held up so well. There are a few tiny pills that you can barely see, but if you look at the underside of the arm, like you can only see when I actually pull on one. They're really not bad. The yarn has very much held up over time, especially as one of my absolutely most worn sweaters. I grab this sweater constantly. I love this sweater. And I really think that that is due more to the feel of the yarn combination and the way it drapes than it is to the pattern itself. I'm not saying that if you used a terrible pattern, you'd still get an amazing sweater. Obviously, you want to use a really good pattern, but I just feel like this yarn pairing is just chef's kiss perfection. And I used gift cards that I had received to purchase this yarn. So it was a bit pricey, but I paid for it with gift cards. So it feels like it was gifted, all of it. So I just really, I love this sweater for a lot of reasons. And I also love the color, the deep purple, the periwinkle in time, absolute perfection. Can't recommend it enough. So check out Pancake and Lulu. Now we have come to a troublemaker. This is the Shifty sweater by Andrea Mowry, and it is the Shifty version 2. Yes, version 2. I have both patterns printed off, but the change in gauge for the version 2 made it a little bit easier for me because it's not as tight a gauge, a little bit easier to achieve for somebody who's a very loose knitter. Um, so because I did use Spin Cycle dyed in the wool as my contrast color, and that is on the very pricey end of yarns for me, I did swatch carefully for this sweater. Um, so I know my gauge is good. And then I used Gusto Gray Day, which is it says DK yarn, but if you look at the weight of the yarn and the yardage, really comes out to a sport weight. And really, if you hold it up to other yarns, definitely more of a sport weight yarn. So Gray Day is the main color, and then I did use Spin Cycle dyed in the wool for the contrast colors. I haven't really had any pilling. The yarn itself has held up fine. I don't wear this sweater as much as others because I don't always like the feel of a fitted sweater. And I think this had an inch or two of positive ease before. Now I'm pretty sure it's at 0 or negative ease, which is fine. I still think the fit is flattering, except what happens with the yoke when I start moving around. So I'm going to do that for a second. I'm going to sit down, get a drink, and tell you about what happens to the yoke of this sweater. So I got a drink. I stand up again, and you can see where the extra fabric is starting to move around. But then if I go reach for things, come back, all right, now it's starting to bunch. So the more I move around at work, typing, reaching, picking things up, grabbing stuff out of the drawers of my desk, the more I'm having to tug this sweater back into place constantly. And I think part of that is just how the arms come together and the yoke depth. Maybe it's because I have short shoulders. So for me, the yoke depth is actually too much. So the sleeves start here. And for a fitted sweater, I would think I'd want a slightly shorter yoke depth maybe. And that would keep it from moving around on me as much. But I just am constantly having to pull on this sweater to get it to lay right. Frustrating because I think the sweater itself is beautiful. The yarn itself has held up well over time. It doesn't get as much wear because it is so fitted, and it does end up bunching up constantly. So I wore this to work yesterday with a skirt, and I was constantly tugging on it. Every time I stood up out of my chair, I was having to tug on this sweater, and that can just be a frustrating distraction in the day. But I do still wear it when I get dressed up because it feels dressy to me, maybe because of how fitted it is. And I do like it. I do eventually get tired of the neckline being like chokehold on my neck. You're not going to see me knit turtleneck sweaters. Can you guess why? But so overall, I think it's beautiful. The yarn has held up fairly well, but this sweater does not get as much wear as my other sweaters. I did enjoy the process of knitting this sweater, though, a lot. This knit was very chocolate chippy for me. I really wanted to just keep going. The mosaic knitting process was great. Sorry, I still have a cough from getting sick earlier this month. I've looked at the Shift Again cardigan that just came out, but I hesitate there because rather than mosaic knitting, it is stranded color work, and it appears as fitted as the design for the Shifty, and I don't wear cardigans as solo garments. Like, in a lot of pattern photos, you see cardigans fully buttoned up, and they don't appear to have anything underneath them, and that is not how I wear a cardigan. So my fear is that that cardigan would be so fitted that I would never wear it because anything I wanted to wear it with would add bulk under the arms. But it's such a beautiful look that I may look into it eventually. But of the cardigans that Andrea Mallory has come out with recently, the Trinigan, I think is called, is definitely my top pick, and I have the yarn for that, and I hope to be casting on soon. 2 more pieces, y'all. If you have stuck with me this long, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed getting everything out, putting it on, and talking about the yarn qualities and why I do or don't actually wear it. Because a lot of times we see a finished object in a podcast and then we might never see it again. And maybe the person's wearing it like every day, but maybe they ended up not loving the way it wore over time. So I really like when people revisit older projects and talk about whether or not they wear it. So this is the Chantilly cardigan, and I knew when Laura came out with the original sneak peeks of the Chantilly patterns that I wanted to knit them, especially the vest. And I think I'll hit on the vest in my short sleeve video because I'm running out of time today and I need to wrap this up and I don't even know when I'll get it edited. So this is my Chantilly cardigan. Like I said, I don't often wear cardigans as solo garments. I know Laura's got a picture of like her Chantilly tucked into the waistband of some pants. I'm not a sweater tucker, so I don't do that usually. But I do love this particular cardigan buttoned up as its own whole thing because of the big statement collar, and it just feels fancy. I think that it feels extra fancy because I went with these pearl buttons. Originally, I was going to go with cut glass buttons, which I think would tone down the fanciness a little bit. And I'm still back and forth on whether I made the right decision on the pearl buttons. I think that they are great, and I love it with the right outfit. But it does definitely mean that I don't reach for this cardigan in a casual context because between the collar and the buttons, it just feels like a fancier knit. And maybe I need to, that's just a hang up of mine and I should let go. But I love the big fluffy sleeves. Oh, I've picked up some extra fiber. The big sleeves, I love the room it has in it. The length is great. I think a lot of people went a little bit shorter on the body of the cardigan. But I like, especially because I figured I would be grabbing this cardigan and wearing it over things as a layering piece for warmth. I like a little bit longer. And I did go back in and run a piece of sewing elastic through the ridge where the collar is picked up in order to bring it in a little bit, because the design is great and I think needs to be the way it is, but the weight of the yarn was pulling the collar more open on me and I wanted it to draw in a bit more. So I have not totally tied off that sewing elastic so that I can bring it in even more if I decide I want that. The pattern calls for the ruffle to be in the fingering weight yarn, and my ruffle is in the mohair, and I like the way that drapes better than the fingering weight yarn. In fact, I did the fingering weight yarn ruffle on my vest, and I feel like that's why I'm not wearing it. I am not, every time I put the vest on, the way the ruffle sticks up on the shoulders drives me crazy. Like, absolutely drives me bonkers. Can't stand it. Is that because I used Woolly Knit British wool and it's a stiffer wool than what is called for? I knit this out of Filcolana Arvetta held double with a strand of Filcolana Tilia, so 3 strands together for the body, 2 strands for the collar, and a single strand for the ruffle. It's the same concept in the vest. So is it because I used that more rustic wool from the British wool cone? Is that the problem? Why I don't like the way the ruffle lays? Or is it just that I would prefer the floaty femininity of the mohair over the fingering weight yarn? So my intention is probably to rip that ruffle off and redo it because I have plenty of the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair left, and I just feel like I would actually get wear out of that garment if I liked how the ruffle laid down on the shoulders better. And I love how the ruffle lays on this one. So I do wear this. I do reach for it. Maybe not as much as if it were a neutral color, because I did pick a yellow and I love the yellow. It may not be my perfect color, but it is pretty close to a light summer yellow. It just doesn't match everything, but what it does match, my main hang up, is that it sheds all over everything. So I'm hoping it eventually gets to the point where it stops shedding quite so much. But if I wear it with a darker color under it, I can't take it off because I'm covered in yellow fuzz all day. But I still love the pattern. I absolutely recommend it. This was my first time working with Phil Kalana, both the Arvetta and the Tilia. I love the feeling of both. I think it makes a great fabric. And so I used that for my daughter's Christmas present. If you remember the ballet cardigan, I used Tilia and Arvetta together for that because I just feel like it makes the softest, drapiest fabric. But it also seems to hold its structure not at all. So I do think reinforcing with a little bit of elastic is the way to go if you're using this yarn combination. Last, but certainly not least, is my Saglan pre-knit. And I am excited to say that just this week, I got an email from AilbÍona McLochlainn, the designer, saying that the Saglan is going to be released shortly. There are going to be a couple of changes to the shoulder shaping. I don't know what those changes are. I have not received the updated pattern, which is fine since I had totally finished mine. But it was originally supposed to be released in October. Stuff happens. Designers changed their plan, which was fine because it gave me time to finish it. It was a pre-knit, not a test knit, so I didn't have to finish before the pattern release. But I did have to have started and have a project page posted. So I had done that, but I was able to actually finish, and it should be released within the next couple of weeks, which is amazing. This is my first sweater in Nutiden, or any unspun yarn. So this was a light gray Nutiden held with a strand of natural or undyed suri alpaca. The Aran weight gauge actually said to hold Nutiden double, but I decided on Nutiden and a lace weight for my first time. I am planning some Nutiden held double projects, but because of my climate, I have fuzz flying around. Because of my climate, because it gets hot here, and doing such a basic sweater that I wanted it to be wearable more often for me, I went for the more loose and open gauge of the lace weight plus one strand of Nutiden. And I love it. It does, you can see like there's plenty of positive ease. I think this is the size 3 of the pattern. It's supposed to have a boxy fit, which it does, and it's great. I have obviously not been wearing this very long because if you remember my most recent podcast, this is my most recent garment finished object. I feel like even though my measurements were bang on, that my collar looks deeper, fatter, than the project photos from the designer. So maybe now that it's been washed and blocked and everything, I need to remeasure it. But while I was knitting it, the collar depth was bang on. This was my first folded collar that I knit down, unlike the folded collar that I did on the Casa Grande. This one, I just knit the collar down, and I did end up putting a strand of just super thin sewing elastic through the top of the collar to draw it in, because prior to that, it was standing up a little more than I was comfortable with. I love this sweater. It's so soft. It's easy to wear. It is warm, but I haven't had time to see how the Nutiden holds up. I expect a little bit of pilling, but I don't really know for sure because this is my first experience with unspun yarn and seeing how it holds up over time. So this sweater I definitely want to revisit in the future, but just to be all inclusive of everything that I had knit sweater wise in the last 3 years, I wanted to go ahead and pop this one in. Would I recommend this pattern? Absolutely. Did I mess up on the pre-knit? Yes, because this is supposed to be 2x2 rib, like the collar and the cuffs. I don't know if I just misread it, if I just didn't even bother to read it, or I wasn't paying attention, but it doesn't bother me enough to try and rip out unspun yarn and suri alpaca and do it again. Not happening. Thank you for joining me for this video about how my knits have held up over time, long sleeve edition or sweater edition, whatever you want to call it. But I only have about 10 minutes to clean up and get out of the house. I'm not sure when I'll get this edited and posted, but it is the last full week of January right now. And it's finally cold enough to actually wear a sweater again. It's been fairly warm the beginning of January here, but I'm loving having a selection of hand knits now and looking more closely at what attributes make me want to wear the garment repeatedly. I still plan to knit things for the joy of knitting them, but it is nice to put things on and reflect on how is it held up? Do I still like the style? How often do I reach for this? And in what situations do I wear it? If I wear it in a situation where I don't end up liking it, what was that and why was the reason? Or, just reflecting on how I utilize my handmade wardrobe. Like I said, it won't stop me from knitting things purely for the joy of knitting them because this is my creative outlet and I don't think anybody should tell you not to knit something. If you want to knit something, knit it. Go for it. Even if you know you won't wear it. Find somebody who will. Give it to somebody else. Knit for your kids, knit for your spouse, whoever you want to knit for. Absolutely feel free to knit for the joy of knitting. But as I look through my stash, think about the things that I want to add to my wardrobe and how I want to use my stash yarns since my goal is not to purchase as much as possible. I'm not going to say I have a total yarn ban, but at least not to purchase without absolutely having a project ready and in mind. I really want to be stash diving. And in my next regular episode, I do plan to show you a couple of stash diving projects that I have started recently that I'm very excited about. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and say, have a great day. I hope that you are working on something that brings you joy, and I hope that you have a wonderful weekend, whatever it is right now for you. If you have any questions about the patterns, the yarns, needle sizes, fit, anything, feel free to comment below. I probably won't link every single Ravelry project page. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll have the time. If I don't, I will put my Ravelry handle below, and you are welcome to come gaze at my project photos and see what I've used. But thank you for joining me today. Once again, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing. It really makes my day and just gives me warm fuzzies, and I love the community that we have built here. Bye.